The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoke and gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me as always, my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I am doing pretty good. I hope everybody's having a great night.
On tonight's episode, we are going to be talking about a fascinating thing. Now, we've done multiple shows on what's going on in the world and what's going on behind the scenes and all that stuff. We did one last week on cannibalism. Now, this week is going to be another show that is going to talk about something that's going on behind the scenes, but it's going to be a lot more uplifting and fun. This is not going to be one where we're talking about horrifying, terrible, scary things that are going on. This is going to be one that's going to make you smile and make you go, wow, man, that's awesome. Because on tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about and explaining something that, well, quite honestly, was viewed as absolutely impossible for a long, long time. And that is turning a desert into farmland. Now, this is something that people have been trying to do for quite a while. Now, I think, first of all, to understand how to transform a desert into fertile farmland that can feed the world, first you have to understand what a desert is, how a desert is formed. Now, for those that already know this information, it's just going to be a nice little refresher. For those that have absolutely no idea, it's kind of interesting. Most deserts at one time were not deserts. Some were jungle, some were regular pasture land and forest and stuff like that. But what happens is people begin to cut down the trees and they farm the area. And as you cut down more and more trees and plow up more and more land, there's nothing to hold that topsoil down. So what ends up happening is you start losing land. It becomes sand, essentially. And there is no way you can farm it anymore. A great example of this, now that is a simplified version. Okay, I'm not going to go into great detail on how a desert is formed because that's not what the show is about. Just a little bit of background is what I want to give you. A great example of this happened in our country. We actually did a show on it, and it was called the Dust Bowl. If you have not seen that show on the YouTube channel, go check it out because it is fascinating. Very quick sum up of what happened in the Dust Bowl is certain commodities, certain crops were worth a lot of money. There was a very large spike in the cost of like corn and things like that. So what happened was you had a lot of people from back east that said, well, hell, man, that's like a new gold rush. We can make a lot of coin. So they came out west and they bought cheap farmland. And they dug it up and they planted crops. And then they harvested the crops, sold the crops, and left. Now, what they did not do is plant a winter crop because they weren't there to plant a winter crop. They were just there to make some quick cash and then bail out and put the thing back up for sale. So what you had was a whole bunch of land that had been plowed up. All the grass and everything like that had been plowed up off of it. And they planted their corn and their other stuff. And then once they harvested that, there was nothing holding the soil in place. So after the fall harvest, when winter came and those winds started whipping, the topsoil went away. It was blown away. So the reason they called it the Dust Bowl was because all of this topsoil ended up in the air. And you would have giant black clouds that would block out the sun, and it would be in everything. Like people were putting blankets and towels and wet towels and stuff underneath their door frames, just trying to keep the dust out of the house. It was that bad. It got at its peak so bad that dust from the West Coast blew all the way across the country to the White House in Washington, D.C. and to New York City. That's nuts. Now, I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail on the Dust Bowl either, because once again, that's not what I'm trying to talk about tonight. But that is a point in American history that not a lot of people know about, because it's not really covered in any kind of detail in school. So I definitely suggest you go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/James Hershey Jr., and find that episode we did on the Dust Bowl, because I go into a lot of detail there. And that is a brilliant, brilliant show. It is wonderful. Amazing story. So that's the essential idea of how a desert is usually created. You cut down the trees, you dig up the ground. There's nothing to hold the topsoil in place. The wind comes along, blows the topsoil away. You're left with desert. Now, we have a lot of desert. We have the Sahara Desert over near Africa and the Middle East. We have multiple deserts over in that area. And we have desert right here in our own country out on the West Coast in Arizona and a little bit of California. Now, that makes up a hell of a lot of land. The Sahara Desert by itself is gigantic. So imagine if you could take all of that wasted land and grow crops on it. No longer would you have to worry about anybody on the planet going hungry, because there would be such an abundance of food that literally we could feed everybody. Now, obviously, you would still have the issue of money. You know, they're not going to give it to you. So you're going to have to be able to pay for food. So I guess if you're super broke and you don't live in a country that'll help you, you're probably still kind of screwed. But at least the amount of food that we produce would be much higher. So if you look at the idea of supply and demand, that's going to make the price of food go down substantially, because there's going to be way more in supply, and it'll be so much easier to meet the demand, so the price will drop. Also, you wouldn't have to worry about the population of the planet anymore, because that's one thing a lot of people are freaking out about. They're like, oh man, we've got so many people now, the earth can't handle this many people. We just don't have the resources to feed everybody. Now, once again, I don't know how true that really is. It seems to me we could have a lot more people than we had if we really wanted to. It's not a matter of not being able to produce the food to feed everybody. It's a matter of the food that we can produce not getting to the people that need it. That's the main problem. Because every year we have corn, wheat, barley, stuff like that rots in silos every year. So there's food that is being produced that we are not using. It's not selling. So I don't think it's a matter of not producing enough food. Another thing we could definitely do, which they do in other parts of the world, is in a lot of countries like Vietnam and places like that, they eat insects, because insects have more protein than beef or chicken or any other meat. A lot more protein. And you can raise hundreds of thousands in a space the size of a closet. So, I mean, that is definitely an option if the world's population was to get super high and we had to worry about how we're going to feed anybody. You could simply use bugs. Now, I know that sounds gross, but I'm not saying you got to just pick the bug up and eat it. They're doing things now that are absolutely fascinating with bugs. They're actually making flour out of insects. And essentially what they do is they dry the insect and they powder it, crush it up into powder, and they use that as a flour to make bread and to make cookies and to make all kinds of stuff that you can eat that do not taste like bugs. Very fascinating stuff. Now, some people still wouldn't want to eat it because it's still a bug and it kind of freaks them out. But I'm kind of an adventurous guy, and I've actually eaten many bugs as bugs. I didn't crush them up in a flour. I've just eaten them because I've done a lot of survival stuff where I'm out for long periods of time and stuff, and you eat what you eat, you know. One thing you can find anywhere in the world pretty much is bugs. Now, you got to be careful with some things on what you eat and what you don't eat, but anywhere you are, you can pick up a stick and dig a little hole and find worms, and you can eat them. You know, a lot of people think that's gross, but if you clean them off so they're not all dirty and squeeze the dirt out of them. Because one thing people don't know about worms is when they travel through the ground, they bring the soil one side and it comes out the other, and they get nutrients out of it that way. They eat the decaying stuff that's in the soil, and that's how they feed. And then when it comes out the other end as castings, it has a lot of stuff the plants need to survive. So it's this awesome ecosystem. So you got to squeeze that out of them if you want to eat them. But you can find them everywhere in the world, and they are edible, and they have tons of protein, and they're really good for you. But they're worms. But they don't really taste like much. They're just rubbery. So that's one option we could have. But if we could turn deserts into viable farmland, then we wouldn't have to worry about that, because literally we could feed everybody. So how is this done? Well, there's this Norwegian scientist named Christian Morten Olesen, and he patented a process where he mixes nanoparticles of clay with water, okay? And then he binds that to the sand particles. And what that does is condition the soil of the desert so it can actually hold more water. Now, he's been working on this since like 2005, and it's called liquid nano clay, LNC for short. So what it does is the treatment gives the sand particles a coating of clay, and that completely changes the sand's physical properties, and it will actually allow the sand to bind with the water. Now, this process does not include any kind of chemical agents or any kind of artificial stuff like that at all. And it's quick. This isn't a process of turning the desert into farmland over months and months and months, because I already know how to do that. That's easy to do. You can do that by putting organic material on top of the sand, and it will rot. Okay, you can use wood chips, you can use grass clippings, leaves, stuff like that. Basically stuff you put in a compost pile, that's what you're going to do. Make a giant compost pile over top the desert, and it will all rot, decompose, and form topsoil. But that is a process that's going to take a full season. That's a long time. This is very, very fast. This process only takes 7 hours. So in 7 hours, you can turn whatever portion of desert you've treated into a high-yield agricultural land. Okay? You will produce a lot of vegetables and fruit, and you will produce large vegetables and fruit this way, because there's so much better water retention. Now, this is an idea that has been done many times before in different ways. Okay, this is a way he's figured out to actually treat the sand so it can become soil that will hold more water. But some people were doing this with diapers, and I know that sounds crazy, but what they were doing is they were taking diapers and they were cutting them up into small little pieces, and they were putting them down in their plants and their gardens and stuff. And because the diaper is so absorbent, when you watered, it would hold a lot of that water. And then the plant would be able to utilize that water whenever it needed it. So you didn't have to water as often. It was watered much better. And the plant took it when it needed it, as opposed to flooding it with too much water. So the plants thrived. They did amazing. So that's the same idea here, but he's found a way to treat the sand particles itself. So what they do is they mix the natural clay in water, and then they put that in the sand, and it essentially creates a 1/2 meter layer into the soil that turns the sand into good fertile soil. Now, normal sand, what the desert usually contains, those particles are very, very loose, and what that does is it causes them to have a very, very low water retention capacity, so they can't hold very much water. The water goes right through. But when you add this liquid nano clay to the sand, it will bind the sand particles together. Now that means it can hold water for way longer. Think of the diaper again. Same principle. It will hold that water so that the plants, whatever you're planting there, always have a steady supply of water. It's very, very cool. Now, they had a trial of this product in the United Arab Emirates, and they planted 2 different sections of crops. Okay, they planted tomatoes, they planted okra, and something else. I don't remember what the third thing was, but there was 3 different types of crops they planted, and they had 2 areas where they planted them. In one of the areas, the sand was treated with the liquid nanoclay. And in the other area, it was kind of the control area, and they didn't treat it with anything. It was just sand. So in the plot that they planted with the liquid nanoclay, it saved the water consumption of the plants by more than 50%. So that basically means that you can double the amount of planting you do with using the same amount of water. Or another way to say it would be that whatever you plant uses half the water that it would normally use. The untreated area used about 137 cubic meters of water when they irrigated it. And the one that they treated with the liquid nanoclay only used 81 cubic meters of water. That's huge. What that does is allow you to not only plant in the desert and it will hold water and grow things, but it is suited for that climate because that climate doesn't get a lot of water. So you can make do with a lot less water and still grow crops there, which is amazing. The only issue is the cost. The cost per hectare, which is 2.4 acres, is anywhere between $1,800 and $9,500, depending on the size of the project you're doing. So if you're only doing like one section of 2.4 acres, you're probably looking at a lot higher cost. The more acres you do, the more of the product you're buying it in bulk. So the price is going to be lower per acre. But unfortunately, what that means is it's a little bit too expensive for normal people to do. But I don't think it's too expensive for governments to do. And as time goes on, the price will come down, as with everything. So hopefully the goal here would be that eventually this product would reach a point to where it would be affordable for everybody. And it would be not only for turning deserts into farmland, but also just for any kind of area where you don't have very great soil. You could make your soil much better. The soil that you create will require about a 20% retreatment after 4 or 5 years if you till your land. If you don't till your land, it lasts a lot longer than that. For those that aren't farmers that have no idea what I'm talking about, basically tilling is plowing. Okay, it's when you're turning the soil. When you're digging down and turning the soil, that's tilling the land. So for right now, I would guess that the target for this would be government, because they're the ones that are going to have the pockets deep enough to do this. But I think this is a very cool opportunity, not just for individual governments, but for everybody in the world, really, if you think about it. Because this is, quite honestly, an absolute game changer. This could completely change the survival of nations. Okay, a lot of these places, like over in Africa, where they don't have any food, that could really change. Because you could take an entire desert if you wanted to and replant it. And you could feed all the world's hungry. Now that's something I don't know if you would have to use like the United Nations, or if there could be some kind of coalition of governments of the world that could get together and do this to turn the desert into farmland again. That would be awesome. I mean, hell, we can do coalitions to go to war and kill each other. Why the hell can't we do coalitions to save the world, right? I know it's kind of a dumb idea. Most people, would look at that and say, that's crazy, man. There's no money in it. Well, yeah, but who cares? It ain't always about money. Sometimes it's just about doing the right thing. And this would be a thing that would be worth doing. Another kind of interesting point to this is it's really not just about food. I mean, yes, you could definitely grow crops there and produce more food, but nothing says that everything you plant has to be food. We could literally produce forest if we wanted to. Now, this would be amazing for creating more wood for building and burning and paper and everything you use wood for. But also building gigantic forest would do a hell of a lot for the environment as well. Because one thing that all plant life produces as a waste product is oxygen, which we need to breathe. And what they breathe is carbon dioxide. So if you're one of those global warming people that believe that that's a real thing, plants pull a hell of a lot of carbon out of the air. That really helps the environment. That would help with global warming if you buy into that theory. Probably, honestly, the very best thing in the world you could do if you believe in global warming is plant trees wherever you can, because they pull out a great deal of carbon out of the atmosphere, and that is very good for our planet. So you have to look at it like that too. Transforming the deserts into viable farmland or forest, or just putting ground cover, period, on them would go a long way to cooling the planet down and go a long way to producing a much better environment for all of us to live in. Plus, you could create habitat for endangered species. Species now like different tigers and lions and stuff like that don't have a whole lot of territory anymore they can live in. You can create territory. Now, they can't go to the desert now and live because there's no way for them to live. But if you turn, let's say, 10, 15 miles of desert into a forest, all of a sudden you can put several species in there. All kinds of different things. You can create a whole ecosystem if you want to. Literally, it's endless the amount of cool stuff you can do with this technology. It's amazing. It can completely change our planet. Now, what I'd like to see happen, which I guarantee it won't, but what I would love to see happen is for them to release the formula publicly. Instead of trying to turn this into a money-making thing, I understand it's their invention. I understand that it's an amazing thing. But imagine if that formula was open source where anybody could do it. That would be amazing. Because then it would go from, well, I got to go to this company and pay this outrageous price to get it done, to, hey, this is something we can do ourselves. And then everybody could start transforming the land that they're on into better land. If you live in an area with desert, I mean. Now, there are several ways, real quick, I'll get into before I throw over to Old Boy, that you can better your soil where you are. Probably the absolute best way, and what I've done, is create a food forest. What a food forest is a place that you create where everything is edible. So what I did was I started with a field. Now, this field used to be a garden. We'd go down with the tractor and we'd plow it up and plant our garden every year, and then we would go harvest the vegetables and can them and dehydrate and all that stuff. And then the next year we'd go back and plow the grass up again, and it was a process. But what happens when you do that is you're continually getting rid of nutrients in your soil. And that constant plowing of the ground is destroying the ecosystem of that soil. All the little bugs and microbes and bacterias and little no-see-ums that live in that soil, that create this thriving, healthy ecosystem that their plants need to survive and to grow and to thrive, gets destroyed when you overturn the earth. The better thing to do is what God does. Now, you may not be a religious person, and that's okay, because you don't have to believe in God for this to make sense to you. Think about a forest. How does God do it? In nature, does God have anything that goes out there and plows up the ground? No. In nature, everything is covered. That's why deserts are such a bad thing, because when we, as human beings, come along and screw that up and plow up the land and cut down the trees, there's nothing to hold that topsoil in place, and it goes away. But in nature, in a forest, what happens is the trees drop leaves. Now, the leaves have multiple purposes. One purpose is to smother any competition. So as little bitty trees and plants come up, the leaves fall on top of them. They can't get any sunlight. They die. But also, the leaves contain a lot of those nutrients that the roots of the tree have pulled up from the soil. So when they fall on the ground and they decompose, those nutrients go back into the soil. Now, if you've ever spent time in the woods, you know when you move the leaves aside, the ground underneath there is nice and moist and rich and black and wonderful. That's because that soil is extremely healthy. Now, you can replicate that yourself by simply putting organic material on top of the ground, the same way God does when he has leaves fall from trees. I think the best thing you can use is wood chips, because wood chips take a longer amount of time to decompose. You don't have to put as many on as often, and they're just wonderful. You can use grass clippings. So every time you trim your lawn, instead of bagging all that up and throwing it away, spread it back over your lawn. And that will provide the grass with nutrients. You can even go as far as to just get some paper and cardboard and stuff and put down, and then put grass clippings on top of that. All that stuff will begin to decompose, and it will put nutrients down into your soil. Number one, wood chips. But short of that, you can use a lot of different things. Basically anything that grows that you cut down, you can put back on your lawn to fertilize the ground. The great thing about wood chips, though, is it lasts a long time. So let's say you put 6 to 8 inches of wood chips over top of your ground. Not only are you producing amazing nutrients for your ground, making amazing soil underneath there, but also when you plant now, you no longer have to dig. All you have to do is move the wood chips aside, put your seed down in, cover it back up with wood chips. The plant will put its roots down in the soil itself. And your soil, because it's not being baked by the sun anymore, is going to be soft and supple, and the roots will go in much easier. And your plants will be way better. Okay, that's the way God produces forests and produces land that grows wild edibles and stuff like that. It's the best way to do it. That's how you create a food forest. So what I did was I put a bunch of fruit trees in, and then all around the fruit trees, you put like strawberry patches, blueberry bushes, raspberries along the sides, because they kind of crawl all over everything and spread. You can put like wild onions and garlics and carrots. There's all kinds of stuff that comes back year after year after year. So then at the end of it, when you're done planting everything, it becomes this ecosystem of its own to where you don't have to ever mess with it again. It just keeps growing on its own and coming back every year. So instead of going out and planting every year, digging up the ground, planting your seeds, waiting for them to grow, going out and harvesting them down, and then either covering the ground or planting something else over the winter so that it doesn't blow away your topsoil. Instead of doing all that, all you do is walk down there whenever you want something, and it's grown and ready, and you just pick it. You don't dig anything up. You don't rip anything out of the ground. You simply pick the fruit or vegetable you want, and the next year it comes back. You don't ever have to do it again. It's amazing. So that's one thing you can do if you don't live in a desert area to create sustainable food for yourself every year. I've got apple trees, peach trees, cherry trees, raspberries. We've got strawberries here. We've got wild onions and garlic. We've got walnut trees. All of these things, pear trees. Every year they just produce food. I don't have to do a damn thing. Now, I had to plant them in the beginning. But now every year I get cherries, peaches, pears, apples, whatever. Everything I've planted. I have everything I need. I got this amazing pecan tree by my house now that produces wonderful pecans. So then you can take those nuts, you can make your own peanut butters out of them. You can do all kinds of cool stuff. Every year you can just can to your heart's content and have tons of wonderful fruits to eat year round. Canned vegetables. It's wonderful. And you don't have to go out there and break your back every year. If you put the work in once, it'll produce forever, which is awesome. That not every vegetable will do that. You can't put corn in your food forest and expect every year you're going to have corn come back. You know, they have to be plants that come back every year. And I don't really know if corn will come back or not now that I mentioned that. I don't know. I've never tried it, to be honest with you. I just planted that in my garden and then dug it up. So I don't know. I'm not going to say it will. I'm not going to say it won't because I haven't researched that. I don't know. But one thing I do know about corn real quick, and then I got to get off here because I've talked way too long. When you plant your corn seed, you can plant green beans with it. Okay, so you dig your little hole, you put your corn seed down in, and put your green bean seed in with it. So what happens is they feed each other. So your corn is going to be much bigger, your green beans are going to be much bigger, and as the corn stalk goes up, the green bean vine will wrap around the corn stalk and go up as well. So you have your corn stalk and you have your green bean vine going around it. And when you pick your corn, you can pick your green beans at the same time. It's amazing. There's several different plants that are like that feed each other and will work great together. So try that in your garden next time. So with that being said, I'm going to throw over to Old Boy and get his opinion on the desert thing. He lives in a desert, so it'll be interesting to find out what he thinks. And I don't know if Old Boy even does any kind of gardening or farming or anything like that, but just to get his opinion on it and his ideas. So, Old Boy, go ahead, brother.
Thank you, brother. I don't do a lot of gardening at all, guys. I'm not into that. I never was. I had to do it a lot because I was a kid with my parents because they had an acre and a quarter in their yard, so I had to do a lot of. My dad was a landscaper for 20 years, so I had to do a lot of stuff. So I don't like doing it unless I have to, but I had to cut a lot of lawns. But I do live in a desert, and he's right. There is a lot of farming area here, so it makes a lot of sense what he's saying. I could see it because I live in Apple Valley, California. It's in the high desert. It's about, it's in San Bernardino County. It's pretty much all desert for about probably about 40 miles, 50 miles one way, another way about 200. Because I'm literally about 160 miles away from Las Vegas. I'm about 110 miles away from San Diego, about 115 miles away from San Diego, and about 130 miles away from the Mexican border. And Arizona, about 120, 30 miles away from the Arizona border. So it's all desert. So, but there's a lot of farming parts. You'd be surprised in certain parts of the desert, like in Lancaster, in Palmdale, there's a lot of farming going there. And you could go, when you're going in it, there's a lot of people because it goes into LA County, but there's a lot of farming. A lot of corn being grown. A lot of people be surprised. Oranges, the orange groves down the hill, that's not desert, but they grow a lot up here too. And even in the desert, they grow oranges and different fruits and stuff like that. And avocados are a big thing. There's a lot of farming here, surprisingly. There's a lot of land. People grow a lot of stuff, a lot of strawberries, another thing. There was a lot of ostrich out here. They had a lot of ostrich farms out here. So there was a lot of farming. There was actually cows. There's people who do a lot of farming. You'd be surprised about it, especially up north. That's more of a green area. But in the desert, that could make a lot of sense because I live here. And we have in our little area probably about 500,000 people all together, not just in my city, but all together in where I live in this part of the desert. So it's pretty spread out, but there's a lot of people here. But it's surprising what he's saying because it makes a lot of sense. Because you could take the desert like in the middle of nowhere and you did exactly what he said, you could probably make a great farming area, ecosystem. And you could probably make that desert change because it has here. I mean, there's parts that you go to the desert and they made this Mojave Narrows. It's like it has a lot of water. It goes through these mountains and it runs off the mountains. The springs and stuff come down the hills and go into the Mojave Narrows. But they have a lot of trees there in the desert. It's made their own ecosystem. So I could believe it would help a lot. You could save a lot of animals. You could save a lot of people. Help a lot of people who are homeless. it would make a lot of sense. You grow trees, it helps the environment. You want to believe in, global warming. You grow more and more stuff, the more it helps the environment, more green we can get. So you could change the desert totally to something else. That's what happened. Like down the hill was a desert, and it's turned into a different ecosystem. Down the hill would be like, I'm in the desert. You go down more, it goes into Valley to LA, and that becomes no more desert. It's all buildings. A lot of stuff is growing there. That's over hundreds of years, probably about over 120 years of stuff being built up there. So there's orange trees, there's everything, but it was a desert, some parts of that. And then there's some parts that turn into, going to the beach and stuff like that. Because you got to remember that where I live, it's starting up a mountain, it's going all the way down sea level. I live about almost 3,000 feet above sea level. But you go down to LA, it's below sea level, about 3,000, I think it's like 3,000, 3,800 below sea level. So you're going past the sea level, like to the ocean. So it's just like a big giant mountain. You keep going down. It's kind of weird, but I could believe what he's saying because they do it here in this desert. We have a lot of solar. We do, especially in Apple Valley. They have a lot of solar. That's another thing. It's big here, but there's a lot of empty desert here, and they built a lot of it. But they could do a lot of stuff here if they did that. I could see that happen. Maybe not at this area, but probably like 20 miles down where there's no one there. They could make a whole new city, farming city. Start planting stuff, and it changes the whole environment. And I could see that happening. See, I'm not in a big. See, James is really into farming, and he knows how to grow a lot of stuff. He lives on, the mountain, so he grows a lot. So he's into this stuff. He plays a video game called the Farming Simulation. This is something I don't know too much about. I live in a desert. I can tell you how the desert is here, and I know a little bit about the desert, but growing stuff, I don't know anything about that really too much. I can tell you what I've experienced here in this desert, and I do know some of the stuff that happens here. There's farming here that happens. It's surprising some people don't know that, but it happens here. But I could see what he's saying. If you had a lot of animals that are endangered, you could save them with a lot by making those. Remember that movie Biodome? You remember in the middle of the desert they made this whole ecosystem. I know it sounds funny because it's a movie, but that's pretty much that was in Phoenix, Arizona. So you could probably do the same kind of thing, and it's good I brought that up because Biodome's pretty much is a funny movie, but they could probably do that if they did it right. Maybe not in a big dome, but something similar like that, and make a whole nother environment. And you could probably farm things. You could put endangered species there. Like he was saying, there's different tigers, white tigers. I think there's a lot of problem. India they're losing a lot of their tigers. A lot of lions are becoming extinct. You could save a lot of animals, a lot of insects, like in the rainforest. Certain monkeys, we can make different ecosystems to keep these animals here. And farming and to save people, because he was saying there's too many people. There is too many people here. I mean, there's 8 billion people almost, or more. And one day we're going to have 9 billion. This would save the problem of having us running out of food. We'd be able to feed people. We would be able to save animals, the ecosystem, and even make, new cities, if you think about it, where people can live. It's not that expensive as people think. People, it's all this money. Like James was saying, it's not. It's just a lot of time. I mean, if we got rid of a lot of things, we could do this. It would work. But like James says, the problem is people are going to be greedy over money. When money always talks, remember that, guys. People see big $500, millions and millions and billions of dollars. I wouldn't say millions, pretty billions and trillions of dollars. People are going to change. That's what happens with all businesses, though. Really, I mean, they used to want to do something to help people, but then when they start getting all this money, you make a lot of money, you don't care anymore. And that's what happens. So that would help people, but I feel the thing is it's going to be used as greed like everything. Everybody's got to be greedy. Everybody's got to use it for their advantage on something. And making money, they can't just help people. It's always going to be about money, and that's what the sad thing is. And a lot of people are going to suffer from it. And it would, my personal opinion is, if we started finding a way to get rid of money, would be great. That would be, we don't even need currency anyway. We just, I think my whole printing, and I'm getting away from this is on that is, I just think we just had to find things to do so we wouldn't be bored. Because if we didn't have currency or anything to work for, we would have a very boring life. So I think that would be a good thing, is just growing new, farming, and it would bring a lot of jobs to people. You could bring that's another thing, James. We could bring jobs in economy and help people out, because it would, you can get jobs for people farming, picking the fruit, washing the fruit, grocery stores getting built, and having more product and vegetables and different fruits and squashes and even nuts and stuff like that. It would boost the economy. It would just give everybody different jobs to do. Clean air, clean water, make more water companies. We would be able to get more jobs. That would be a great thing on top of it. And if you do believe in global warming, that it would help the environment even more. Less gas we're using and stuff like that. We're using natural stuff. That would be great. We could make water. We could figure out that. That's what I'm saying. This would be a great idea. And people talk about it all the time in the desert, because there's a lot of solar plants out here too. In like the Mojave Desert's got a lot of solar plants, and they run a lot of farms out there, and for the wildlife, because we have to be careful, because there's a lot of wildlife here. Like, there's a lot of coyotes. There's endangered desert turtles, tortoises. They're endangered because people are running them over with quads, and they go on the road, and too many people are moving, up here. So there's a lot, and rattlesnakes are getting they're getting killed all the time. Lizards. There's a couple birds, like the desert owl. They're getting killed a lot because they're getting hit by people doing construction, or they get hit by cars from the freeways and stuff. So that would be a really great thing to help out some of the animals here too in the environment. But there you go, James. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big scientist guy, but that's all I could say about that, brother.
There is no security without food security. I'm going to say that again for those of you who might not have heard me. There is absolutely no security without food security. When you look at all of the tyrants of the world, all of the worst of the worst, people like Mao, people like Stalin, okay? These communist pieces of garbage that killed hundreds of millions of people. Every single one of them uses food as a means to control the population. Now, if you try to take over a country and you start doing messed up things to them, you've got to do a couple things first. First of all, you got to take all their guns away, because an armed population will not tolerate you doing horrible things to them, because they have the means to stand up and to take you out of power. So step one in all these communist and socialist countries is always take the guns away. Because once you take the ability of the people to defend themselves and defend their rights, you've gone a long way now into being able to have control. The second thing they must do is control the food supply. Now, Stalin used that to starve entire towns that didn't listen. So either you do what you're told, or you don't get food anymore. And you might think, well, I'll just grow my own damn food. What are you going to do about it? Well, what he did about it was he'd come in and either poison the crops or simply burn them down. And then if you didn't do what you were told, you didn't get your rations of food and you died. So there's no such thing as security if you don't have food security. You've got to be able to have your own food. As should be very evident by what's going on in the world right now. With what's happening now in the world, people are freaking out because there's nothing on the shelves in some supermarkets when they go. They're trying to figure out how to feed themselves. Well, if you're a person that has your own gardens and you have fruit trees in your yard and stuff like that, guess what? you now have a food supply where you don't have to be as concerned if there's shortages because you already have some. Back in the old days, everybody had a garden. Everybody canned. But nowadays, with all these cities and the more technological lifestyles that people live, they've lost track and lost touch with all of the old ways. Now up here in the mountains, we still grow gardens, we still can food, we still dehydrate, we still hunt, we still fish. So if the supermarket doesn't have food, that really doesn't hurt us all that bad. Yes, it's nice to be able to go buy a loaf of bread and to buy a box of cookies. I love cookies. I mean, the one thing I stocked up on in this whole thing was I bought a ton of cookies because that's one thing I don't want to go without. I have years and years worth of food as far as dehydrated vegetables, canned goods, that kind of stuff that I have been growing and saving. But you can't really save cookies. That's the problem. So I bought a lot of cookies. If you have produced your own food and you have learned how to can and dehydrate, both of which are very, very easy to do, then you start to create an emergency supply for your family. So when hard times hit, it's okay because you've got a basement full of canned goods that you've made yourself, that you grew. You've got bag after bag of dehydrated vegetables that all you have to do is put in some water and you're good. Very, very important to do those things going forward because not a lot matters in this world if you don't have food to eat. All of a sudden that becomes a priority. Now you might say, well, what's to stop somebody from just taking it in an emergency situation? Well, that could happen. That's also why it's extremely important for you to utilize your Second Amendment rights if you're an American and have guns so you can protect what's yours. Now, granted, if an army shows up to take it, I mean, your pistol is not going to do a hell of a lot. But usually an army's not going to show up to take your supplies. You might have one or two people to try to rob you, and you can defend it. So those are just some thoughts. You can take them or leave them. Be a lot wiser of you if you took them, because one thing about country people and rednecks is we can survive. Like that old Hank Williams song, we can always survive. It really doesn't matter what the world throws at us because we produce everything we need. So it doesn't matter if all of a sudden the place where you get all your food from can't grow it anymore because we have our own. I mean, hell, one funny thing back when I was younger was you'd have recessions hit the country and the stock market would take a dive and people would, oh my God, it's so bad out here right now. And well, hell, it never made no difference to us. We were still poor. We always were poor and it didn't matter. So a big recession would hit and everybody was talking about, oh my God, things are so bad. People are getting laid off and there's no money and all this stuff. And well, hell, we never noticed because we were broke anyway. We didn't have money before when the economy was good. And we certainly don't have it when the economy's bad, so it makes no difference to us because we produce everything we need. We feed ourselves. We don't have to worry about going down to the store to buy food. That's why country people can survive just about anything, especially hill people. You know, my family comes from the mountains of West Virginia and Virginia. I mean, we are the epitome of the term hillbilly. I mean, my kinfolk from way, way back were the barefoot guys in the overalls living up in the mountains making shine. That's who we are. Now, as time has gone on, we've accomplished things in our lives, and some of us have gone on to do some pretty amazing things. But that doesn't mean that that knowledge is gone. I can still make shine if I need to. I know how. I can still grow any crops I want to grow that will grow in my area at least. I can still hunt. I can still fish. I still do all those things. I have those skill sets. I can build a fire without matches or a lighter. I know how to construct a cabin. I can make my own log cabin if I want to. I know how to build a shelter. I can build a trapper cabin. I can build a lean-to. I can build even a debris shelter if need be, if it's an emergency situation. I know how to survive on an everyday basis, and I know how to survive in an emergency situation. That's a very, very important set of skills to have. Because as we have been shown in a very slap in the face kind of way recently, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the future is going to bring. You may think, well, why would I need to know how to do any of that stuff? Man, all I got to do is go down to the Walmart or the whatever your grocery store is called and pick up groceries. I don't have to do that anymore. Those people back there in the hills, they were uncivilized. They were savage people. We're civilized now. We don't have to worry about that. Well, this time we got lucky because there's still people that are producing enough food for us to eat for now. We stay locked down too much longer, that might not be the case, but for now, there's still food being delivered to the supermarkets. But there's no guarantee that next time it won't be worse. There's no guarantee that the next thing that happens, there will be anything going to the supermarket. And what happens if there isn't? If you can't just go down to the store and buy groceries, how are you going to feed yourself? How are you going to keep your children from starving? So I think the lesson from tonight's show and the lesson from everything that's going on in the world right now is if you don't have those skills, spend your time while you're in your home learning those skills. YouTube is a great resource. You can learn how to garden, you can learn how to farm, you can learn how to can, you can learn how to dehydrate, you can learn how to build shelters and build fires. You can learn everything you need to know. Because somewhere on there, there's some person teaching you. And it's 100% free. So all you have to do is click on it and watch it and learn. Learn those skills. That way you're prepared. Now, once again, that's some advice from somebody who has lived it and somebody that has those skills. You can either take that advice and utilize it, or you can leave it. Either way you want to do it. But either way, thank you for listening. And I'm going to throw back over to Old Boy for his closing shout-outs.
Thank you, buddy. And I hope you guys learned something from this, enjoyed this, something different instead of paranormal all the time. It could help you guys with what's going on right now. You know, this is a great lesson, guys. I hope everybody enjoyed the show on ParaX Radio. I enjoyed doing this show every weekend every Thursday nights, and then you guys get to listen to it Sunday on ParaX Radio. And then usually Monday, we get it out Monday night. Maybe unless there's something going on, it might come out. And you'll always get it 24 hours or 48 at the most. But most of the time, 24 hours after the show comes out on YouTube, on James Hershey's YouTube page. Subscribe, guys. I hope you guys enjoy what we're doing. We're going to try to get on different platforms down the line to get more of a bigger audience so more people can hear us. So that's coming down the line. Probably we're going to figure it out, but it should be coming. But if you guys want to go on Teespring with where our merchandise is, he'll tell you where to go, the whole site. I don't want to say it wrong. You can get shirts, everything you want that has staring on it, like not everything, but like you can get like phone cases and blankets and all kinds of cool stuff. So just let us know, look it up, and we'll try to put it on the YouTube page. We keep forgetting to put the advertising for the shirts and stuff on there. I keep reminding James to do it. But you guys can check it out, or you want something, check out. He'll tell you where to go. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Misfits, Sugar Ladies, Monster Hunters, and Demon Lovers, I love you, and blessed be, and have a great night.
The YouTube channel is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. Please go there and subscribe to the channel and enjoy it. Every episode of Staring is there. Every episode of Tales from the Abyss is there, the TV show that we do. Plus, there's tons of different paranormal news articles, and there's even some prepping and survival kind of videos that I did a long time ago that are on there as well that you can check out. I'm going to try to do some more of that as time goes on. It's hard. I have a very full schedule, so it's hard to get a lot of that done sometimes, but go check out the channel. We got hundreds of videos up for you. Please enjoy it. The merchandise store is teespring.com/stores/staring into the abyss. That's where all the merch is. As Old Boy said, there's t-shirts and mugs and posters and hoodies and all kinds of stuff there. If you're into merch, that's where it is. Thank you guys for all the support that you give the show. Thank you for listening. And until we speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.